Friend from Serbia who has come all the way to Oslo, the Oslo Pride, to exhibit his project Balkan, which is really passionate, important and very interesting work that he will talk about today or now. So take a seat and stay to see and hear how one opens doors. Welcome, Aleksandar.
Hi guys, thank you for coming, finding the time to hear me speak. I thought we could do this very informally. So basically, I want to introduce myself and then tell you a little bit about the project. Closer to me. Yes, okay. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Aleksandar Crnogorac. I'm from Serbia. I'm a documentary photographer. And the project I'm exhibiting here at Oslo Pride is called Balkan. It's the story of the lives and experiences of transgender people from all across the region where I come from, which is Southeastern Europe. Initially, the project included the countries of ex-Yugoslavia, which is Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, Kosovo, Macedonia, and Slovenia. But along the way, I've decided to expand the project. So now it actually also includes Bulgaria, Romania, and I will shortly be going to Greece and Albania. Basically, I want to include all of the Balkan countries in this project. The project started about 2 years ago, and I was initially inspired by a friend of mine, somebody I call a friend now, whose picture is here, Helena. She used to be a general in the Serbian army before she decided to transition. So her experience very much inspired me to start this project. I'm kind of a documentarist by nature, so it didn't take long before I decided to travel elsewhere. I also think it's really important, especially in the region where I'm from, to try and promote cooperation amongst the countries. And I think this is also the scope of the project. It really has become a regional project. So I think, let me see. The way I started meeting initially people was just in Serbia. The internet played a key role in me being able to contact people. Later on it became easier because, of course, as you all know, there's all sorts of chat groups and meeting points for people. And once I got in, I found it easier to continue. I'm not an expert. I'm an activist, so I'm here obviously to talk about my experience and what I've learned along the road. I think if you've had a chance to look alongside each portrait is also a text. The first part of the text is just biographical information, where the person's from, what they've studied, what their work is, and then the second part is a direct quote from each individual. I think it's crucial to actually hear from the trans people themselves, because in my part of the world, unfortunately, it's often the case that it's somebody else talking about trans people. You rarely get to hear from trans people themselves directly, which is why the concept is such that there's a direct quote from everybody. Just a second. Yeah, initially, I'll tell you a little bit about the journey of the project. I applied for competition that the government of Serbia, actually the city of Belgrade, has a competition once a year. 10 artists get to exhibit their work in a central gallery in Belgrade. I applied and I was surprised to hear that I was chosen. So the first exhibition of Balkan was in Belgrade this past February. It went really well, to all of our surprises. Got a lot of media attention, positive media attention, I should stress. And then somewhere along the road, I decided it was my goal to take the project to all of the countries where I photographed people. So far, after Belgrade, we visited Zagreb in Croatia. We went to Novi Sad in Vojvodina. We've been in Sofia, Bulgaria, in Skopje, North Macedonia, and later this summer we'll be going to Montenegro, Albania, and Kosovo. So the project is growing, and I'm very grateful. I'm also very grateful to Oslo Pride for having invited me to be here and to talk to you guys today. I wanted to also show you some pictures later on. The traveling exhibition consists of 35 large-scale portraits. They're 50 by 70. Here, obviously, you get the smaller version. And it is composed of 35 individuals so far. Obviously, I've continued working on the project, including other countries, so now I've come up to some 68 individuals, and I would like to maybe reach the number 100, and the final goal is to publish a book. Again, the project itself is political. Obviously, it's a political statement, even though I do try to stay away from the topic of trans politics, because I'm part of the LGBT wider community, but I'm not an expert in trans politics, and I also thought it was important for people to approach this project. I thought it was more effective to allow the public to meet the individuals without really diving into the politics or into the medical procedures or anything that's so personal, which obviously I choose not to discuss. And the project itself was thought of having in mind the wider public. It's not to say that the LGBT community is obviously welcome to visit the shows, but the project itself targets more people who maybe have never met a trans person, or maybe just don't know they have met a trans person. So the original scope is to educate and to raise visibility, because
no place I've visited so far where the trans people live an ideal situation. So I don't like to point out which country is better, which is worse. I think what we can measure is in which country people get more medical care. And Serbia seems to be the leader in the region. It's the only place where people get psychological and medical care, and they're actually helped by the government. When her transition, she got operated back in 1995, which is between between maybe the Bosnian and the Kosovo war in Serbia. She says she waited for her parents to pass away, then she sold most of the land she had, used it for, obviously back then the government didn't help, so you had to pay everything yourself. She transitioned. When she came back to her village for 3 years, nobody said a word to her, not even hello, good morning, nothing. And this lady, when I visited her, she had broken both of her hips. In fact, in this picture, she's lying down. And just this sheer force this woman had, and the message has really stuck with me. She says the only regret she has is not having done this before, or not having lived in a place where this would have been possible. Yeah, Brankica is amazing. She was 86 here. She likes to say that she's 36 because her life started only when she transitioned. Let's see who's next.
Since she has actually moved to Sweden and is now living in Sweden, she's transitioning, and she's actually become a very important voice within Macedonia for the trans community. I think she was the first public figure in Macedonia to go through transition. This is somebody I met about a year ago. She comes from Montenegro. Montenegro is a tiny, small country on the shores of the Adriatic, quite conservative, or in the Balkans it's considered one of the most conservative areas. To my surprise, the situation for trans people in Montenegro is very much getting better. They have a very strong, small but strong community, and she's part of that community, and the government under EU pressure has really been doing their part of the job. As I said before, they're sort of forming a medical team. I think they're getting help from Serbia to do so. This is Helena. This is the woman who actually inspired me to start this project. She used to be a general in the Serbian army, and I think her cause really helped set the trans question in the public debate in Serbia. Obviously, it was a big deal to have a general of the Serbian army transition. Initially, she was fired, her pension was taken away, but she fought on, and she managed to win the battle in court. She got her pension back, And she really is just a bright example for me personally of how things should be done. She's very courageous, very strong. I insisted, well, I was hoping to photograph her with the uniform. She says she'd never put it on again, but she did accept to pose next to it. So, and I really do love, thank you. I really do love the juxtaposition, you know, because the Serbian army has stood for such negative things, and she's just a great example of the diversity within the Serbian army. So that's how I know. This is also somebody who I like to point to as an example of things I hope will come for the trans community. This guy has a PhD in, I don't remember, but very smart, very educated. Being that unemployment is very high in the Balkans, people often do stick to education, which is, you know, ironic, but in the long run, a positive thing. He comes from a small town at the border of Serbia and Croatia, very educated, very progressive. This as well. This guy studies, I think, Japanese and Hungarian. So, you know, just a random but very, very powerful mix. Janko, I think he's just 20, started his transition recently, and this photo was taken in a bar next to my house in the neighborhood where I live. Yeah, I should say I initially wanted to photograph all the people in their own space, at their home, but shortly after I started, I realized this wouldn't be possible because most of the young people don't live alone, they live with their parents. Some of the people were ashamed of their surrounding. So I just basically then chose to give them the choice. I do also do fashion photography, that helps me survive. But none of these pictures are posed. And it was important for me to let people show themselves as they wished. This is Jelena, she's from Belgrade, she's a sex worker. This picture is actually quite old as well. It's one of the oldest pictures. This person no longer lives in Serbia, she's now in Austria. This is Jolly, he's from Montenegro. He's also an activist, very powerful guy. Again, young, educated, definitely the future of the trans community in the Balkans. This is Kristina. Kristina is not only an example for the trans community in Serbia because she transitioned a long time ago, but she's one of the, can you guys see from the, she's actually one of the few open sex workers. She fights for the rights of sex workers in Serbia. Unfortunately, sex work is something that's very taboo in Serbia, in the Balkans, and being trans and a sex worker is double the burden, so she's a very strong freedom fighter as well. This is Lara. Lara is actually from Serbia but moved to Montenegro, which initially I was very confused by because, as I said, Montenegro is very conservative. Walks around, no problem, no one can tell her nothing, very proud, very strong and brave. This is a friend who's from Kosovo, also an activist.
Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.